Starting at 19, I dated wealthy married women for money. Ask me anything. I spent 2 weeks agonizing over whether or not to create this thread. Finally, I made up my mind. This isn't about showing off or trying to get attention. This is something I've kept secret for over 20 years, and my family still doesn't know anything about it. I think right now I'm sharing this information about myself as a kind of therapy. It all started in 2003, when I was 19 and working at the Everglades Club in Florida. I parked golf carts, served drinks, and helped out with events. Basically, I did a bit of everything. If you keep your eyes open in places like that, you can see a great deal. About 6 months into the job, I happened to meet one of the club's guests. She was close to 50, a stunning blonde, always impeccably dressed. She was married to a man who was almost never around. We talked a lot, laughed together. Our conversations little by little became more personal, and eventually turned into something more. One day, we met outside the club, slept together, and she handed me $4,000 in cash. For a 20-year-old guy back in 2003, that was more money than I had ever held or even seen in my entire life. She convinced me to quit my job at the club, and for the next 2 years, we spent a huge amount of time together. Through her exclusive social circle, I met many other women at various charity events, private parties, and lavish weekend getaways. They would often take me along without much explanation, buy me gifts, and generously cover all of the expenses. Gradually, all of this turned into a chain of secret paid relationships. Over these years, I had relationships with the wives of billionaires and multimillionaires, executives of major companies, and people well known in their fields. Almost every one of them was cheating, and often their husbands knew about it and didn't mind. For many of these marriages, it was more a matter of image and convenience than real romance. Quite early on, I became fascinated by female psychology and the very nature of intimacy. I studied body language, timing, behavioral patterns to understand why women who seemingly have everything still keep searching for something more. Today, I am no longer financially dependent on this side of my life, but I have never completely left it behind. The first money I earned became my starting capital for investments, which now provide for me. In just over 20 years, I have visited 31 countries, stayed in luxurious suites, and been on yachts whose value exceeds that of entire neighborhoods. I have seen fleeting romances turn out to be more enduring than marriages themselves. I think that's enough backstory. Ask me anything you want. In all these years, have you ever been caught by the husbands of these women? Have you ever worried about your safety? In just over 20 years, I can only remember 5 women who actually got caught. Of those 5, only 2 got divorced, the rest stayed married. And what's surprising is that very little changed in their lives. The reality is that in these circles, marriage is most often about money, status, and social standing, not about love or exclusivity. Many outsiders don't understand this dynamic. If a woman does get caught, the husband's reaction usually falls into one of 2 types. Either he tacitly accepts what happened from the start, or he gets angry at first but eventually comes to terms with it anyway. The reason is simple. Divorce is financially devastating for these men. If she has been with him for a significant amount of time, she can take at least half or even more of his wealth, plus expect lifetime alimony payments. Many of them would rather swallow their pride than risk forfeiting hundreds of millions. I've even had cases where the husband not only knew but was directly involved in the whole affair. Countless times I have been with a woman while her husband watched the whole process. Sometimes it's a matter of control, sometimes just voyeurism, and sometimes it's a shared fetish they've kept secret for years. This kind of thing actually isn't all that rare, especially among affluent and wealthy couples who are used to getting whatever they want. As for my personal safety, I've never had a husband physically attack me with any sort of aggression, but there have been times when I had to get out of there quickly if someone came home much earlier than expected. You learn very quickly that you should only act in fully controlled circumstances and rely on the caution of the women themselves. It's mostly the women who are the ones who make sure everything stays secret. Did women ever tell you in advance that they were married? And were there times when a couple chose you together? Yes, some told me right away while others only mentioned it later. There were also situations where it became absolutely clear that I had been chosen by a joint decision. More often than not, this happened after a festive evening or a specific type of social gathering. Such cases appeared to be much more calculated, but sometimes it happened quite spontaneously. What did you notice while being around people from high society? Do they see people as expendable, or are they truly looking for a genuine connection? From what I've observed, it's both. For those at the top, people can be considered expendable if they don't bring any benefit or value. But that doesn't mean they don't crave connection. The problem is that their understanding of connection is different from that of ordinary people. Most often it's transactional in nature, even if it's not about money. It could be about status, influence, access to something or someone, or simply the thrill of interacting with someone outside their usual circle. For many, genuine emotional intimacy is rare. They're used to everyone having their own agenda, so when they find someone with whom they can relax without fear of judgment or hidden motives, it feels especially significant. That's exactly why some women see me for years. I'm not from their circle, I don't compete with their lifestyle, and I don't reveal their secrets. In their world, trust is more valuable than money. Bro, help me get into this industry. This isn't the kind of field where you can just submit a resume or respond to a job posting. Here, almost everything depends on appearance. And whether you like it or not, a lot depends on race and body type. In practice, these women have very specific tastes, and a huge number of them are drawn to black men. That's just a fact from my experience, and I'm lucky to be black. Beyond those steps, it is really just a matter of being in the right places where wealthy women tend to gather: charity galas, luxury hotels, exclusive private clubs, or high-end art exhibitions. You cannot afford to rush things here, and you must not look like you are trying too hard. These women are always somewhere nearby. You just have to approach them and give it a try. I'm really curious, how has your family still not suspected anything? How do you explain all the trips? Are you still in touch with that first woman? My family never really asked many questions. I just say that I work in real estate and finance. If I'm in Europe for a week, they think it's for work. I haven't been in touch with that first woman since 2009. By the way, about that first woman, how did it happen that at first you were just driving a golf cart and then suddenly, bam, you were already in bed with her? Who started flirting? Whose idea was it? How much time passed from your first meeting to sleeping together? With her, it all started gradually. Light conversations, playful comments, lingering eye contact. She was the one who made the next move. From our first meeting to ending up in bed, it probably took a couple of weeks. In one of your answers, you wrote that once you got 170,000 in 4 days. What is that like? I mean, how do you even process that? You probably felt a deep sense of pride. But simultaneously, it seems completely absurd. At first, of course, it all seemed surreal to me. I'd only seen sums like that in movies, and now they were coming into my account in just a few days. At first, it makes you feel proud, but mostly it's just shocking. You very quickly realize that in certain circles, money flows on a completely different scale. For them, these aren't crazy expenses. It's pocket change compared to their wealth. I don't really think about it in terms of morality because in their world, that's just normal. These people live in a completely different economic reality. They can spend the same amounts on a bottle of wine or a watch without even blinking. For them, it's not about need or excess, but about what they want here and now and their ability to get it. You simply become part of their desires. How much have you earned in total over all these years? Did you yourself lead women to this, or were they the initiators? How does a conversation like that even start? Over all the years, I've earned a little over a 7-figure sum, specifically from women, but much more from the business projects I run in parallel. In the beginning, I didn't have to convince anyone at all. More often than not, they were the ones taking the initiative. Now everything works through word of mouth. I have a limited circle of clients, and I only agree to new meetings if the offer is really substantial and justifies the time spent. Wait, the first one gave you 4K, the maximum was 170K for a weekend, and in 20 years you barely scraped together just over $1 million? Most 40-year-old nerds from Reddit since 2003 have already made 7-figure sums long ago. You're looking at 2 specific numbers and taking them as representative of my entire career, but that's not the case. Those were exceptional situations, rare peaks, not the usual rates. In reality, most of the arrangements were different. In some cases, there were long-term relationships with smaller but stable payments. In others, it wasn't about money at all, and I turned down many offers myself because they didn't align with what I wanted. My life and my decisions have never been about chasing every possible dollar. Yes, the paycheck was really good, but that was never the single reason to stay in this field. There are many details and context that I have deliberately left out for confidentiality reasons, and without them, it's easy to draw conclusions that don't reflect how things really were. How long and thick is your tool? The total length is 23.5 centimeters, and the width is about 3.8 centimeters. What have you taken away from all this that helps you in life now? One of the main things I realized is that women are much more preoccupied with these things than many men tend to think. Their desire for intimacy is much stronger than people usually assume. And for many, it's not just a physical need, but also a way to feel alive, desired, and strong. Men often think that women can easily go without sex or only seek it for the sake of romance, but that's far from the truth. Under the right circumstances, they can easily match men in this drive or even surpass them. Another important observation is that money changes the rules. It's not just about buying things, but about the power and access that money provides. Money opens doors that most people don't even notice. And once you realize how quickly it can shift the balance of power, it's impossible to look at it the same way as before. In this world, it is those who possess resources who set the pace for everyone else. And no matter how perfect wealth and influence may look from the outside, in reality, the lives of most wealthy people are empty inside. Smiles at balls, vacation photos, and seemingly perfect marriages are most often just a facade for the sake of image. Behind closed doors, loneliness and boredom are often hidden there. In your opinion, how are women different from men? Would you say that now you understand women? Men and women go through life with different operating systems. Women are more sensitive to emotions, atmosphere, and hidden subtext, while men are more often focused on action and directly solving problems. A man usually tries to fix the problem right away, while a woman may prefer to live through the situation, feel it, and understand it more deeply. Neither approach is better or worse. They're simply different ways of responding. Over time, I realized that understanding women doesn't mean learning a set of techniques or characteristics. It's the ability to be attentive and not impose your own perspective. Then you start to notice patterns. What inspires their trust, what gives them a sense of security, and what attracts them. Sincerity is especially important to them, even if it's fleeting and they instantly pick up on insincerity. Sometimes a small detail, like the way you look at her during a conversation, can mean much more than a grand gesture. I wouldn't claim that I completely understand women or that I'm an expert. No one is capable of that, but I have studied their intimate side, desires, and needs in this area very well. Do you have any proof for everything you've written? Proof of what exactly? Do you want me to post bank statements, plane tickets, hotel bills, or selfies on a yacht with someone's wife and a thank you card in the background? My face and all the details remain a secret. That is exactly why I have lasted so long in this world. Have women ever openly discussed or shown a particular interest in fetishes or strange kinks? That's a common stereotype about rich men. But what about women? Yes, many are into it. Most had some kind of fetish, and almost all the women I've been with secretly had a thing for black men. Dirty talk is almost always a must, and many adult women like the missionary position far more frequently than people think. Some liked engaging in it outdoors or on hotel balconies for the adrenaline rush. Others were more into control scenarios. For many, their fetishes in one way or another came down to power play and the thrill of doing something behind their husband's back, even if it was just a special way of talking or a risky location. A lot of them also enjoy a breeding kink. Usually it's not about extremes, but about intensity and the depth of connection in the moment, something they don't get from their husbands. Have you ever developed feelings for these women? And how did that affect your personal relationships? Yes, that has happened, but not in the way most people imagine. With some of them, over time, a strong emotional attachment would develop, and that complicated things. After all, there were supposed to be clear boundaries from the start. In the context of my everyday life, it made intimacy more complex and layered. I got used to a certain level of excitement, attention, and a lifestyle that is hard to recreate in a standard relationship. That's why I try to consciously avoid comparing these two worlds. All of this has undoubtedly influenced my perception of intimacy, trust, and vulnerability. I've read almost this entire thread. I've had a similar experience myself. When I was just over 30, I slept with more than 50 women over 6 years, ranging in age from 18 to about 50. From your description, your story sounds plausible, but something else is strange. You've been doing this for 20 years and have barely made $1 million. How is that possible? That's really not that much. And it doesn't seem to align with the premium rates you wrote about. Considering you don't have any expenses, you have access to unique professional connections, and you get paid very well for your time. I don't want to sound skeptical, but unless you had some huge overhead expenses, I don't quite understand how that happened. It's possible because that figure isn't accurate. In reality, I made much more. People heard one number and fixated on it. But I've been doing this for a long time, and my income didn't just come from clients. At the same time, I had other business ventures as well. I left out a lot in the post for privacy reasons and simply because I don't see the point in stretching it out to 20 paragraphs. I'm sure no one would want to read the entire novel of my life. Hi, author. Thank you for sharing. Do you have any tips on appearance? What works best to attract a woman's attention, for example, clothing style, choice of perfume, and so on? And maybe you could share which personality traits they like and which ones they don't. Appearance matters, but not at all in the way men usually imagine. What's important isn't how expensive your suit is, but that your clothes fit well, are comfortable, and look like a conscious choice. Neutral, well-tailored clothes almost always win. They don't draw unnecessary attention to themselves, but they create an impression of being put together. The same goes for fragrance. A light, fresh scent works better than heavy, sharp perfumes. A woman should only notice it when she's close, not from 5 meters away. As for personality, confidence works best, without the need to constantly prove it. Listen more than you talk. But if you do speak, let it be something meaningful. Don't brag and don't be overly accommodating. And most importantly, don't chase after her. Women like a man who moves at his own pace, doesn't need others' approval, and makes them feel that they have to earn his attention just as much as he earns theirs. That's my opinion. First, how do you imagine a happy life? The answer may or may not be related to your own story. Second, Have you ever interacted with the children of these women? Third, how has this experience influenced your view of close relationships? Would you be able to openly date or even marry a woman like your clients if you had the chance? Or would you prefer to be with someone for whom intimacy isn't just a transaction? Or maybe alternative relationship formats are closer to your heart? Fourth, what do you usually talk about with your clients? For me, a happy life is freedom, the ability to wake up and choose what to do without being tied to a hated schedule. That's the most valuable thing money can buy. I've never interacted with their children. That part of their lives is completely separate from me. All this experience has made me more selective in relationships. I could date or even marry a woman like my clients if there were a real connection, but I would still prefer to be with someone for whom intimacy isn't just a transaction. At the same time, I'm open to different types of relationships as long as there's honesty. Our conversations are far from always being about intimacy. More often it's about travel, art, news, business, politics, life stories, and much more. If the communication isn't interesting, then everything else loses its meaning. You mentioned that you created this thread as a form of therapy. What exactly do you want to get out of it for yourself? That's a good question. I think in part I just wanted to speak out without any filters. In my real life, almost no one knows about this, and I have no one to openly discuss it with. Taking the time to write everything down here means giving myself the chance to rethink what is happening, something that wouldn't happen if I allowed it all to remain trapped inside my own head. And maybe, by doing it this way, I can start to gain a deeper sense of clarity about what all of this means to me in the long run. What value system do these people have? Do they follow the views of any philosophers or thought leaders? It seems like they live by their own rules, although really it's just a different set of strict norms. When I first found myself in this world, it was a real shock to me. I grew up in poverty, and seeing how these people live, spend money, and the circles they move in was like landing on another planet. It's not about philosophers or ideological reference points here. The main thing is the image, appearance, reputation, and money as the highest value. As long as the image and the usual order are maintained, a lot becomes permissible. It's not chaos, but it's also not the kind of morality that most people live by. There is an unspoken rule. Laws are determined by power and convenience, not by ethics. Marriage can be a deal, relationships, a strategy, and loyalty is measured by the ability to keep secrets, not by love. If something threatens the public image, it is dealt with quickly and quietly. If it doesn't pose a threat, they simply ignore it. That's how their world works, and it endures precisely because everyone benefits from maintaining this system. That's my personal opinion. I won't ask anything, but you said women who had everything were still searching for something more. In reality, it's clear they don't have everything. They're stuck in marriages of convenience where the husband is constantly absent and most likely is cheating himself. For them, this might be better than marrying for love and living in poverty their whole lives. That's why turning to someone like you is just a way to fill an inner emptiness. Exactly. From the outside, it may seem like they have everything, but on the inside, everything is mostly held together by money, not love. The husbands are busy with their own affairs, and the wives quietly fill in the gaps without sacrificing their lifestyle. Hello, author. I was also a sugar baby and an escort in the past, only I'm a woman. I'm curious. What kind of story did they make up for you when they took you to such events? After all, it's not easy to explain where a married woman suddenly gets a 20-year-old companion from. Overall, great answers. I'm sure many people on Reddit would be surprised at how often wealthy couples have such arrangements. Thank you. And yes, I'm sure most people would be very surprised to learn just how common such arrangements are, especially among the very wealthy. Whenever I attended various events, I was almost always introduced in a way that appeared perfectly natural and acceptable. Sechi. I was the nephew, the godson, the son of a family friend, or even a promising young employee being mentored in business. These stories were usually thought out down to the smallest detail and tailored to the specific audience so that no one ever had any questions. In circles like these, people seldom ask any questions directly anyway. But I was never introduced to the families. That was my strict condition from the very beginning. First, when you were just starting out in 2003, how did you even arrange meetings without modern apps? Was everything done over the phone, or did club staff pass notes between people? Second, I'm curious, if the client covered all the expenses, what did that look like in practice? Did she give cash every time, or did she just put everything on her account at the hotel or store? Third, you mentioned the Everglades Club. I've heard that they have very strict rules for members there. As an employee, did you have to follow any special rules? Fourth, how did you usually report this income for taxes? Did you list it under a specific category or just keep the cash? Fifth, in the early 2000s, when you were just starting out, what did you write in the occupation field on your tax return? Did you list it as self-employment or something else? When I was just starting out, everything was done the old-fashioned way. All arrangements were made in person or over the phone. No SMS, no apps. Sometimes it all came down to her just naming a time and place before leaving the club. Secrecy was the top priority, so nothing was written down or passed through the staff to avoid leaving any traces. If the client covered the expenses herself, I almost never saw any bills. Flights were booked for me, hotels were already paid for, and dinners were charged to the room. Clothes were bought right in the store. Sometimes they might leave an envelope with cash, but more often my expenses were simply added to an existing bill. The Everglades Club really did have very strict rules for both members and staff. No phones in the halls, no photos, no discussing clients' lives outside the club. Everything was built on privacy and tradition. I won't go into details, but I always made sure that everything was handled legally. Some payments were in cash, some through other arrangements, but everything was settled in a way that I wouldn't have any problems. At first, I would put something vague but legal on my tax return, like consultant or contractor, and report it as self-employment income. I won't reveal any more details beyond that. What did you learn about female psychology, and what were your main conclusions when you said, "I studied body language, timing, and behavioral patterns"? And where can one learn more about this in detail? Many men see female psychology as a mystery to be solved. But in reality, it's more like a wave you need to learn how to tune into. Women are deeply driven not by logic like men, but by state, energy, and the feeling of the here and now. The moment plays a huge role. Say the right words at the wrong time and they lose their impact. Stay silent at the perfect moment and it will fill the space more powerfully than any words. Intimacy is not just physical closeness, it's the ability to catch micro-emotions even before she notices them herself. It's knowing when to hold your gaze a little longer, when to pause in conversation, when to change the rhythm. Everything in her behavior carries signals. Notice how she gently touches her hair when she's interested, how her breathing softly changes when she feels at ease, and how her voice sounds when she's truly captivated. There are many insightful books on this topic, but I would specifically highlight Archetypes